nonpartisan political organization whose mission is to encourage informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League does not support or endorse candidates or parties, although it does work to influence public policy through education and advocacy. This forum, funded by the League Education Fund through contributions from members and community donors, is devoted entirely to our voter service activity, whose mission is to give information to voters so they may make informed decisions. The forum is being filmed by the Media Center, and it will be aired on our cable public access channels. Watch for the schedule and live streaming on communitymediacenter.net. For more information on the election, we recommend that you visit smartvoter.org or our League website, www.lwvpaloalto.org. Please pick up a Smart Voter bookmark and a voter's guide and a fax for voters on the back table in the back of the room. The candidates' campaign materials are on tables outside the council chambers. You're invited to stay after the forum and meet and talk with the candidates personally. And now I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight's event, Mary Jo Levy.
Thank you, Mary Alice. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to the Candidates Forum featuring candidates for the member of the California State Assembly, District 24. The 24th District of the California Assembly includes the communities of North Fair Oaks, which is an unincorporated area in San Mateo County, Atherton, Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, Woodside, Portola Valley, Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, a portion of Cupertino, and the San Mateo County coastside from El Granada to the Santa Cruz County border. The upcoming election is a primary, and the top two candidates, regardless of political affiliation, will face each other in the November general election. Now I'd like to introduce the candidates for the position of Assembly member representing this district. Greg Coladonato will speak first as a result of a drawing between the two candidates who are here tonight. And Rich Gordon will speak second at the beginning. At the end, they'll switch their roles. We regret that Diane Gable is unable to attend this evening. She was offered the opportunity to provide an opening statement to be read here tonight, but did not opt for this arrangement. So welcome, candidates, and thank you for agreeing to participate in today's forum. Now, in the interest of time decorum, the League asks the audience to abide by the following ground rules, which have been agreed to by the candidates. And I apologize in advance for its length, but it will help us all be on the same page. So, number one, there will be no substitutes or stand-ins for the candidates. Number two, the candidate responses should pertain to the question at hand. Very difficult for politicians. Candidates will not interrupt each other. Candidates will bring no visual aids to the forum room. The League has provided each candidate with a paper pad and a pen for taking notes during the forum. The candidates will not be allowed to use electronic devices during the forum. The campaign material may not be displayed in the forum room. The League has a table outside for candidates' materials. I will enforce the time limits as the moderator. I may interrupt the candidates if I believe the candidates are straying from the subject. There are time signals, which are yellow and red cards. The yellow is shown to indicate 30 seconds remaining, and the red card indicates the candidate should stop speaking. The questions to the candidates must be written on cards provided by the League at the forum, and they will be circulated by volunteers in the audience. Cards are to indicate if a question is directed to a specific candidate. And if you would like a card picked up, just raise your hand like that. There shall be no audience demonstration until the end, such as clapping or booing or anything like that during the forum. No audio or video recordings may be made of the program other than that made by the forum sponsored and copyrighted by the League of Women Voters, Palo Alto, or one of our forum sponsors. Any copies of the tape may be shown only in their entirety and by specific permission from the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto. Candidates are not allowed to use video or audio from the debate, no matter how it has been obtained, in or for commercial advertising or campaigning. So we are almost ready to begin. Right now, members from the leagues are distributing cards, and a few of them have been picked up already. And we'll be sorting questions for the next 45 minutes or so. We suggest that you put one question per card and keep the questions brief. As the cards are collected, the questions will be selected following these guidelines. Similar questions may be combined, if appropriate, to avoid duplication, or they may be edited for brevity or clarity. Inappropriate questions will be eliminated. This includes questions that are not related to the office or subject of the forum, or that are personal attacks. Questions will be chosen to cover a variety of topics, and all the candidates, or both of the candidates, will be offered the opportunity to respond to all questions, even if one or more is directed to a particular candidate. Note that there may not be sufficient time to answer all the questions, but we'll do our best to have a broad discussion. And the format for tonight will be as follows. Each candidate will make a 3-minute opening statement. After that, they will respond to questions from the audience. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. At the end, or a little after 8 o'clock, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. To help us keep on track, timekeeper Linda Davis of the Cupertino Sunnyvale League of Women Voters will signal each candidate when 30 seconds are left and when his time is up. So at last, we're ready to begin. So, Mr. Coladonato, in the order of seating, your opening statement.
Thank you very much. I'd like to first start by thanking the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased with the service you provide the community. My name is Greg Coladonato. Allow me to just introduce myself briefly. I'm running to help play a role in upgrading education, tackling debt, and fighting corruption here in the state of California. I was not born, but I was raised in California. I went to primary school and high school down in Southern California. After that, I went to New York. I enrolled at Cornell University in 1989, where I met my wife in the third row there, and I got a degree in computer science and a degree in applied physics there, and was a software engineer for a number of years. I probably should have moved to the Bay Area right then in 1993. That would have been a good idea in hindsight, but I went somewhere else and wrote software. I eventually went to business school. I went to Wharton in 2003 and got an MBA there. And I graduated in the top 5% of my class there at Wharton. But I didn't take any courses in politics there, so I still don't know too much about politics. But after Wharton, I moved to the Bay Area. My wife and son and I moved to San Francisco, where for a little while, I took one of those now infamous Google shuttle buses before they were in the news from San Francisco to Mountain View. And eventually I moved to Palo Alto, and we lived here for 3 years until we found a place we could afford, which was a house in Mountain View, where I live to this day. And so I want to just tell you a couple things about the way I'm running my campaign, which I think differentiate me somewhat from most of the people running in California. I do not accept any financial contributions, any campaign contributions from any firms, any special interest groups, any trade unions, trade groups of any sort, only people. And so when my contribution information is made public on whatever schedule that happens, you'll be able to see there's just a bunch of people's names, none of which you've probably heard of. They're not famous, but they know me and they know I have integrity and they like my character, and they're supporting me. For the purposes of this for this, corporations are not people in my book, so it does not, they do not qualify. I also don't accept endorsements. To me, they feel like a type of a quid pro quo relationship. If some group endorses me and then I go to Sacramento and they say, by the way, this bill's coming up and you know we endorsed you and we helped you get elected, so you better know how you're supposed to vote. I don't think that that is healthy for democracy. And so I don't accept endorsements. I don't seek endorsements. I don't accept campaign contributions. And I call this my Declaration of Independence. The other thing I do, I have a Facebook pledge. Like one congressional representative I know of, every vote I take in Sacramento, I will post my reasoning and my vote to Facebook. And so all my constituents and everyone else in the world can assess my reasoning. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
Thank you. Let me first thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum and providing an opportunity for all of us to participate in our democracy. Also want to thank those of you who are here and most importantly, those who may be watching us on cable as this is broadcast. Also want to thank my opponent, Mr. Coladonato, for being a part of this tonight. I have had a life dedicated to community service. I spent 20 years running a nonprofit social agency, taking care of young people and families in our community. I served on the San Mateo County Board of Education, and then for 13 years I served on the Board of Supervisors. I'm now in my 4th year in the California State Assembly. When I was first elected in 2010, I said that I would have 3 priorities if I went to Sacramento: government transparency, our environment, and education. I'm pleased to say that during my tenure, I think we've made some progress in each of those areas. As it relates to government transparency, I'm very pleased that Governor Brown recently signed a bill that I wrote that provides the Fair Political Practices Commission, our political watchdog, with greater tools to help us know who is funding political campaigns. On the environment, I've worked to guarantee that Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District could refinance their debt in a way that actually provided them with more operating capital on an ongoing basis while reducing the debt. And finally, last year, I was pleased to be able to support the local control funding formula, a new way of funding our schools which brings more money into education and targets that money to those who need it the most. California is on the rebound. When I went to Sacramento 4 years ago, we had a $27 billion deficit. This year, we will have a surplus. There are issues, however, to be addressed. One of those has to do with how we handle that surplus and how we create greater fiscal stability for the state of California. We also need to make sure that we fund our schools in a manner that is appropriate. We still, even though we've increased funding, are near the bottom in per pupil spending compared to other states. And finally, California faces a huge challenge in this year and in years to come as it relates to the availability of water. So there are issues still to be addressed, still to be worked on, and I'm seeking to return to Sacramento to continue to work on these issues and to complete the promises I've originally made in 2010 when you first elected me. I look forward tonight to discussing these issues and others as we move through this forum.
Thank you. Now we are going to go with each question, a different different candidate going first. So I'll alternate back and forth. So Mr. Gordon, I'm going to start with you for the first question, which is, state revenues so far this year are more than $1 billion higher than forecast when the budget was passed. What are your priorities for use of this surplus?
Well, I think that we need to be looking at the surplus that we have and putting the money into 3 buckets. Bucket number 1, we ought to be working to pay down our debt, and that ought to be one of our priorities. Secondly, we ought to be setting aside some money in reserves for future needs. And finally, we ought to be reinvesting very carefully and very cautiously, and I'm particularly interested in reinvesting in education. Next week, the State Assembly is scheduled to vote on a proposal for a rainy day fund in California. that would put something on the ballot for November of 2014, allowing us to set in our Constitution a permanent way for us to deal with our reserves and to pay down debt over time. The proposal that we'll be looking at is one that I support, and I believe that it will help bring greater fiscal stability to California.
Mr. Coladonato?
I support Governor Brown's rainy day fund proposal. I believe that it is more prudent than some of the other proposals which had been floated. My understanding of it is that it holds money a little more tightly in the fund than some others would like it to be held. But after the way our legislature spent money after the dot-com boom and bust, I think that an overabundance of caution would be appropriate with the extra money we have these days. As far as education being, as far as educational deficits being paid back to primary schools that have been built up since 2007, I think that would be a good place to spend money first, but I'd rather see the money spent on nothing at first until we find out if a correction is coming in a year or two, or if we still have a few more years of good times before we have to batten down the hatches.
Now, Mr. Coladonato, you're the first person to answer this one. What do you see as the 3 greatest needs in the district?
Well, it's hard not to notice that there's an issue related to the price of housing in this district. In Mountain View, it is one of the hottest button issues right now. A lot of people are finding that they can't afford the rent in the next lease, or that or people want to move here and they can't believe what it costs to buy a house here. This is a difficult problem. The reason, I believe, one of the reasons housing is so expensive is because the people that live here don't really want this area to look like Hong Kong and have high-rises up the hills, but some of the best companies in the world are based here, and a surprising number of people that move here become billionaires. And so there's going to be a big demand to move here. It's a question of whether the people that already live here are interested in building enough and approving and going along with development enough to let some of these other people move here that want to. I think another critical issue is how cities are going to deal with pension issues that are going to be coming up more and more. See, Stockton has gone bankrupt, San Bernardino bankrupt, Vallejo bankrupt, San Jose getting close. I'd like to see the cities in this district take this bull by the horns and address these problems before they surface. And for a third issue, let's see, I think I'm about to run out of time, so I'd like to see better representation of the primary firms in the area, the tech firms in Sacramento. I haven't seen a lot of that so far.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. Let me say that obviously housing is an issue in our region. We have a jobs housing imbalance. We have more jobs here than we have places for people to live. That means that we need to take a look at how we create housing for all of our people at all wage and income levels. The jobs housing imbalance, I think, leads to our second problem, and that's the fact that most of our roads are in gridlock, and we need more opportunities for transportation alternatives in this region. And finally, I would say that the third major problem for us, candidly, in this region is infrastructure. We, as a community, have not invested in maintaining our infrastructure, and so our roads are crumbling. We have pipes that are decades old that are deteriorating, and so we need to invest more to protect and maintain the infrastructure in this region. So housing, transportation and transit, and infrastructure are the 3 issues that I think are most important at the moment in this region.
Both of you have brought up housing, so here's a question. What can the what state legislative strategies are possible to address rising housing costs? Oh, I'm sorry, and Mr. Gordon, it's your turn.
Thank you. One of the things that the state can do is to help provide and guarantee that there is a ongoing regular funding stream for affordable housing. Currently, there is no dedicated funding source to help underwrite the cost of affordable housing in our communities. We used to have redevelopment in many communities that provided a source of funding for housing, but that's been eliminated. We used to have state bond money for housing, but all that's been spent. I, therefore, am the co-author of a piece of legislation that would put a small fee on real estate transactions. That money would be set aside to be used in local communities to help build affordable housing. And last year, I carried legislation to guarantee that bond money that had originally been dedicated to local community housing trust funds, like the Trust Fund, Housing Trust Fund in Santa Clara County and HART in San Mateo County. That money that was in the state bond was going to be swept last year into the state bureaucracy. I carried legislation that the governor signed that guaranteed that that money stayed in local communities and went to local housing trust funds. Those are some of the things that I think that the state can do to help local communities achieve the housing goals.
I'm not a big fan of adding new fees. I think that adding new fees or adding extra developer fees or other tacking new fees onto development to me seems to just make the problem worse, because it's just those costs typically get passed on to the people that are living in the new places that are developed. I'd like to see a way to, I'd like to come up with ways to enable cities on their own to, if they are open to growth, growing as they see fit. I actually don't see that the state has much of a role in mandating, either directly or through regional agencies like the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG. I and I think a lot of other people in Mountain View, maybe Palo Alto too, are not particularly fond of having these kind of regional entities send mandates over and say, well, you know, based on how many people are coming to California, you guys have to house this many. Whether it's a city that has lots of open space or a city that does not have any land left to build on. This one-size-fits-all that usually comes from the top, I don't think works very well. Speaking of fees that are collected in Mountain View, we have a developer affordable housing in lieu fee that this fund has millions and millions of dollars piling up in it, raising costs, but it's kind of hard to figure out for City Council to figure out what to do with that money. So it just sits there, and all the while, property is not really being developed into affordable housing, and the costs keep going up.
Thank you, and you received the next question. Do you support the Bay Delta Conservation Plan that includes the twin tunnels to convey water?
So the water is certainly a difficult problem. I know the initiative on the November ballot to raise $11 billion for water projects like the Bay Delta Plan the bill was originally called, I think, the Safe, Clean, Healthy, and Stable Water Act, which of course sounds like everyone should support it. It's going to cost another $11 billion. And when I learned that that we still have $89 billion worth of prior water bonds on which we pay approximately $10 billion of interest every year, the idea of adding another $11 billion to the water bond credit card to me sounds imprudent and potentially something that we could do if we had a little more money in the bank. But in the meantime, I think that we should be doing more to conserve. Growing up in Southern California, I am no stranger to water conservation programs. I still remember, I think it was Ricky the Rambunctious Raindrop, who was the character in some elementary school programming about conserving water. I still do those things in my house, and we teach our children to do that as well. I think everyone should be doing their part to conserve more, and maybe we won't have to spend and borrow quite so much more to address the water shortages.
Mr. Gordon?
The proposal to build 2 tunnels or canals to bypass the Delta is one that we have studied and looked at in California for a long time. Many of us remember the debate on the peripheral canal. The tunnel is the same thing. The tunnel might be okay for environmental reasons if it conveyed no additional water. But the problem is that those folks who want to see the tunnel built want that tunnel built to convey additional water. The Delta cannot afford that. The Delta is a very fragile environment in California. It is really kind of the heart of our water supply system. And the delicate balance between the bay waters, the salt waters, and the fresh waters that flow from the Sierra down into the bay is critical. So we cannot afford to have any more water taken out of that system. So at this point, a tunnel project does not make sense. I've been working as part of a group in the State Assembly on a revised water bond, a water bond that would look at alternative projects and not include any spending on the tunnels.
Okay, Mr. Coladonato?
Yes, ma'am. Wait, I just went first last time, and I already answered that question.
Sorry. Yes,
New question.
Rich. Please comment on the proposed legislation to regulate antibiotics in livestock and poultry.
We need to be very, very careful about what we inject into the food that we eat. There are some serious concerns and problems with the over-injection and overuse of antibiotics in our cattle feed and chicken and pork and other products. There was legislation that I co-authored that was defeated last week in the Assembly Agricultural Committee. There's a similar bill in the Senate, and we're hoping that that will be able to make its way through. We need to provide some level of regulation and food security for all of our people in California.
I have a deep interest in poultry. My wife and I have 2 chickens in our backyard, and they both lay green eggs. And we eat those eggs, and I swear they do not get any antibiotics, unless my kids are giving them to them. So I actually care quite a bit about healthy food, and I personally read labels. And I was sad to see the GMO labeling proposition not pass 2 years ago. I'd like to see information on labels about what antibiotics, what weird chemicals, what unnatural things are being done to animals that end up on the shelf at Safeway. I, for one, would read what it says. The only thing it currently says is on the milk, it says, these cows are not treated with RBST asterisk at the bottom. It says that does not mean anything. We must put this here. I don't understand why we have a problem with letting the consumers know more about what goes into their food and let them decide. And if everybody decides that antibiotics are bad for their health, then they can choose the other chicken. And so I am supportive of transparency, but not supportive of forbidding farmers from doing what they think is best for their flocks and their poultry.
Mr. Coladonato, a forward question. Fracking, no or yes? And if yes, how?
I'm sorry, it's a forward question. Fracking, no or yes?
Yes. And
Okay, but I can answer with more than 4 words.
Absolutely.
Okay. So a fracking bill was signed into law last year. Some have asked whether it was too aggressive because it does allow fracking, namely in a very large deposit called the Monterey Shale, which may have oil in it. I personally think that it's a good bill. It requires all sorts of disclosures. Everything must be posted on the internet. Any chemical or other things being used are to be shared with the public. Groundwater testing is to be done before and during fracking. And so I don't know if it's safe or not, but I think the only way we're going to find out is letting a firm or two try this type of energy and see if it works. One way to tell whether, one metric to judge as to whether this bill kind of split the difference was it was opposed by both environmental groups and the oil industry, but it passed both houses and it was signed by the governor. So I think it's a very modest and careful, prudent approach, but if those first few sites show that bad chemicals, hydrofluoric acid and other things are leaching into the groundwater, then I would be in favor of permanently banning this practice, but I'll wait and see.
Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. I am a co-author of legislation that would put a moratorium on fracking in the state of California. I am very concerned about this particular mining practice and what it may do to groundwater supplies in California. I did vote last year for the bill that Mr. Coladonato talked about, and candidly, it was the only bill we got to vote on. The moratorium vote did not ever get in front of us. I'm afraid that we'll probably not get a moratorium vote again this year, but I will continue to push for that. We already frack in California, so my preference is to stop fracking and study the wells that have been fracked. Let's understand what's going on there, rather than to continue the practice and monitor and test on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon again. Is there anything California can, or should do to ensure the safety of any delivery of oil via railroads through the state?
Yeah, I think everyone is aware that an awful lot of oil production going on in states east of us. That oil for refinery purposes comes to California and is being shipped primarily by rail at this point. Yesterday, in the budget subcommittee that I sit on in the State Assembly, we took action to look towards increasing rail safety. We also, yesterday, took action to extend the current offshore oil program, oil spill program, to become a program statewide in California. So if there were a spill, we would be able to do a remediation and cleanup using fees charged to the oil companies for the oil that's transported in California. The extension of this program, I think, provides greater protection if there is a problem, but we're also looking very closely at a proposal to increase rail safety inspections in California so that we don't have a problem in the first place.
Mr. Coladonato?
No, thank you. Yes, I don't believe we currently have an epidemic of oil-carrying train derailments, but I do hope we don't have one in the future. I am supportive of whatever types of inspections would help ensure that whether it's carrying oil or carrying people or carrying some of those antibiotic-free chickens, I think that they should all stay on the tracks, whether they're high speed or low speed, like the trains we currently have. So I am in favor of rail safety, and I don't know the specifics of the bill that came up yesterday, but it sounds like it might be a good idea.
Thank you. Mr. Coladonato, what adjustments should be made to Proposition 13? A, split tax roll to increase corporate property tax, or B, increase property taxes for long-term homeowners, especially those with high incomes?
I hope I'm allowed to answer C or D as well, if I think of those. So I know that a lot of people say we need more money in the general fund and in county coffers. I hesitate to propose changing Prop 13 before we first change the wildly out of balance structural financial fiscal issues that we have in the state. I think that those sorts of work should be done there first. But that being said, if we're able to make good progress on the several $100 billion of unfunded liabilities and other problems, I do think that there's something not quite equitable about the split roll tax. I know that that's one reason why companies may support Prop 13, but Prop 13 has a kind of human lifespan type reset in it related to when someone dies, their home is sold, and the new people moving in have to pay the current market value's worth of Prop 13 taxes, but corporations never die. And so that doesn't seem like they should still be paying 1973 property taxes on giant campuses. Separately, I think that maybe the percentage per year increase of Prop 13 might have been too low, because the people that live next to my house probably paid 10% of what we pay in property taxes. Maybe that's a little out of balance. I also don't think that landlords should be able to build a big business on the back of Property 13 discounts for their rental properties.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon?
Yep. I said 4 years ago when I first ran for this office, and I continue to say, that it is time for us to revisit Prop 13. The original goal and intent was to do two things. One, guarantee that people could stay in their homes and were not taxed out of their home. And particularly concern was about senior citizens in 1978. Secondly, the goal was to make sure that people knew what their property tax was going to be, some assuredness about what the level would be, because pre-Prop 13, rates fluctuated annually, and you never knew what you were going to pay from year to year. You couldn't plan or budget. I think there's a way to address those concerns and look at the inequities that have occurred because of Prop 13. Used to be that 60% of the property tax was paid by business, 40% by residents. That's reversed today. It also used to be that the property tax was the same for folks similarly situated. Today, depending upon when you bought your home, your rates are very different. The young family that moved in next door to us last year pays about 15% more in property tax than we do, but they don't take 15% more in services. We need to deal with the inequities of Prop 13 for just the purpose of fairness and equity. And at the same time, we can do that and still meet the goals that were originally designed to guarantee that we know how much we're paying and we protect seniors.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, how would you improve mental health care in California? And what is your opinion on AB 2198, mental health professionals receiving suicide assessment, treatment, and management training?
First of all, let me respond specifically to the piece of legislation that you talked about. I do support that legislation. This would require that mental health professionals receive specific and targeted education around suicide prevention and intervention. And certainly in our community, where we have been challenged by the issue of suicide, certainly we, I think, in this area clearly understand why that would be valuable. We moved decades ago from a system of mental health care based on institutionalization to a system based on community care. And in many ways, that's been a challenging shift for us. It's dependent upon those people who need medication taking that medication. And so I think that we have work to do to guarantee that those who are mentally ill in our communities get the appropriate level of service, get the care that they need, and we need to be doing that in a way that is sensitive to them.
Mr. Coladanana.
Thank you. So I just, a couple weeks ago, graduated from the Santa Clara County Government 101 Citizens Academy, which brought about 3 dozen residents of the county through every one of the county operating units between the hospital and the transportation division and so forth. And the Health and Human Services and Mental Health Division I was surprised how many people they take care of, how broadly and how deep their work goes into all the different communities in Santa Clara County, and I'm sure that San Mateo County does as well. I think that the addressing mental health issues will have more than just could solve problems more than in just that narrow area. As the chair of the Human Relations Commission in Mountain View, I hosted an event called the Civility Roundtable last year in Mountain View called Could Sandy Hook Happen Here? As I have 2 children in public schools, 3 next year, and we, on our panel, we had a psychiatrist, we had a police captain, we had the superintendent, we had the owner of a gun store, and the psychiatrist felt very strongly that if we did more to help people that were vulnerable psychologically, that we could do a lot to reduce gun violence in this country as well, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. You have the next question. What alternative transportation projects do you support in this district? Do you support Caltrain electrification and high-speed rail?
I definitely support rail that travels at high speed. I would like to see Caltrain travel at high speed. I would like to see Caltrain travel faster than people drive on 280. Caltrain's maximum speed is 79 miles an hour. In other countries, for people that have traveled to the developed world, they find that trains should be going 2 or 3 times that fast. And I don't know what the hang-up is. I think we should be able to do that here with Caltrain. And I don't think it needs to be an electrified train. Maybe it needs to be a different type of train. Maybe diesel trains can go that fast. But it should not take 59 minutes to go from San Jose to San Francisco on a train. If it took 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I think we'd see a lot more people taking the train, and it would be a lot better for the environment and for their sanity and for all sorts of other reasons. I am in favor of connecting BART around the Bay. I don't know, I wasn't there when the decisions were made in the 60s to have it stop at Millbrae. I think that was a bad idea. I'd like to revisit that idea and connect it around the Bay. My wife commutes to Oakland quite a bit, out to Livermore. BART could be really useful to us in this assembly district and in this county if it went around the Bay rapidly. Separately, I wouldn't mind seeing a BART spur go down 85, because if you want to find a road that is guaranteed to be in gridlock at rush hour, go to 85, north in the morning and south in the afternoon. So I'd like to see a BART line going right above the center of 85. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon?
Thank you. I do support electrification of the Caltrain line in this region. We've studied this for years, and we know that an electrified Caltrain will be quieter, quicker, more convenient, and able to run more trains. So electrifying Caltrain is a good, important first step for improving transit in this region. I also am a supporter of high-speed rail, but I'm a realistic supporter of high-speed rail and know that it will be decades before we ever see high-speed rail in this region. The funding just doesn't exist. We are the last leg of the current proposal. So an electrified Caltrain is a great opportunity for us to improve our transit system here in the region. The other thing that we need to do is we need to be working harder at connectivity of our transit systems and working so that they merge and coordinate in a new and different way. And so electrification, coordinate our systems, and someday, long after I'm gone, high-speed rail.
Thank you. Get the next question. Where do you stand on the cell phone kill switch currently under discussion?
I support the legislation that would require a kill switch on cell phones.
As I understand this bill, it's a consumer protection bill, and it's meant to help people prevent their phone from being stolen. I think that's a good idea, to keep your phone from being stolen. I had an iPad stolen. It's heartbreaking. But the government doesn't really need to tell people when to lock the doors in their house, or when to lock their car, or how to keep other things from being stolen out of their backyard. I don't think that this is warranted for the government to come out with a requirement like this, because if people who own cell phones would like them to have kill switches, I guarantee that either Apple or Samsung or some other cell phone provider will put it in there if that's what people want. And secondly, the idea that someone out there in the cloud could reach into my phone and turn it off doesn't comfort me, because I understand what sorts of things hackers are capable of, whether they are based in Eastern Europe or if they're based in wherever the NSA is based, Reston, Virginia, or wherever they work out of, Utah. I don't think it's a good idea to, in addition to having them listen to everything we say on our cell phones, also have them be able to turn them off if they don't like what we're saying. I oppose.
You also get the next question.
Excellent.
Should redevelopment agencies or an equivalent structure be reestablished?
There was definitely a good reason to have redevelopment agencies when they were established. And anyone who's been out to the North Bayshore area of Mountain View or been to downtown San Jose or dozens of other places around the state can attest that they did a lot of good. I think that many of them had outlived their purpose in the areas that they were, and I believe it was a good thing for the for the governor to disband the ones that existed. Does the structure have merit? I think it does. I think if there's an area that is badly in need of investment, but no investors are willing to make that investment, enabling the tax increment from that area to be used to secure loans is a very reasonable and a free market approach to a problem that wasn't being solved. So I would support some sort of reintroduction of the concept, but I definitely would not support reanimating all of the dead and zombie redevelopment agencies just because the people who ran the development agencies liked having the power and the money to do what they saw fit. So I would welcome limited reintroduction of this concept in some areas.
I supported efforts to try to reform redevelopment because there were some very good aspects of what it could do in communities. There were abuses, and in some communities, fairly serious abuses. I think building a golf course, not necessarily redevelopment. Having said that, at the end of the day, because of lawsuits, redevelopment ended up disappearing. We need some form of economic development tool for local communities. I favor the state providing the vehicles for local communities to make their decisions about how they would use tax increment or use alternative funding schemes in order for them to achieve redevelopment goals. There are needs for infrastructure, as I said earlier. There are needs for communities to rehabilitate certain sections of their communities, but we need to find tools for local communities to do that. We are working on a variety of alternatives in the legislature at the moment. There is great interest in finding some way to give these economic tools back to cities.
And you get the next question. What can the state legislature do to address the water shortage?
Pray for rain. In terms of the water shortage in California, this is going to be a chronic and ongoing problem for us. This is not just a one-year situation. At the end of the day, we just don't have enough water in this state for our population. We need to do more about conservation of water. We need to look at water recycling and reuse. We need to look at looking more at storage of water. And I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about dams. I'm talking about groundwater recharge and storage. I'm talking about off-stream storage. We don't capture rain. We ought to be capturing stormwater for use. We also will need to look at new technologies, and I believe that particularly in Southern California, desalination may be an approach that needs to be explored and utilized. There's some tests going on in San Diego and Huntington Beach. I think these might be helpful for us to better understand whether that technology can be helpful. We also need to look very carefully at water use and water pricing in California. So water is perhaps one of the most complicated issues to deal with, given how much we all need it. and how little of it there is. But it is probably the biggest challenge that lies ahead.
I am in favor of, to the extent that we don't have enough water, raising the price of water for those that use a lot of it. I think that it's, I would not want to put an undue burden on the poorest members of our community and have them have to pay more for water, for that little bit of water that everyone needs to live. But I think that it should be a graduated scale, and above some family-sized amount of water, I'd like to see the price go up. And I know it already does this, but it might need to go up more, or maybe the lowest pricing level needs to be raised as well. I think that we need to get people to be aware of how much water they use when they take a shower. When they, you know, my wife has been working with our 10-year-old on a project they're doing in 5th grade related to how much water does it take when you shower, or when you run the dishwasher, or run the clothes washer. And we were surprised how little the dishwasher and the clothes washer took compared to the shower. So we're all trying to not shower as much, but shower effectively and get clean, but still try to use less water when showering, like as if you're on a Navy submarine or something. So I encourage everyone to look into this sort of thing, and I think the best way for the state to do something like that, or for utilities to do that, is to raise the price enough for people to notice what the cost of the water they use is.
Thank you. And you have the next question. What should the Democrats do to restore the public's confidence in the Democrats in the legislature, given the recent scandals?
Well, I personally can't say that my trust has been restored in the Democrats after those 3 senators have been, you know, removed involuntarily from the Senate for all sorts of corrupt activity. I think the best thing that both the Democrats and the Republicans can do, and it's not just the people in office, but us, I think we really need to ask if the system we have, in which most candidates get most of their money, and by the way, the campaign spending limit for this election for the primary was something like $400,000. I think I've raised about $2,000 so far. I bought the cards out in the front, you'll see. The system that has hundreds of thousands of dollars spent for a state assembly seat primary is perhaps not a healthy system. Can you get that much? Can you raise that much money without entering into a variety of quid pro quo arrangements, whether they're explicit or implicit, with all sorts of firms and groups that are going to be bringing legislation to the floor while you're voting on bills? I don't think so. I don't accept money from firms. I only accept money from people. I think that voters should only vote. I only vote for candidates like that because I want to know that when they go to Sacramento, they're not out trying to run drugs and run guns to get more money for their campaigns, but they're looking out for the common good.
Go ahead.
I was recently asked by some folks, don't we need more laws to deal with the problems with members of the legislature? I'd remind you that folks who have been accused and convicted broke existing law. What's really imperative is that those of us who elect political candidates not only inquire as best we can about the political positions, where people stand on issues, but get some sense of how can we judge their moral character. Because at the end of the day, we're going to have all the laws that we might create. And if we don't elect people with good moral character, who come with a conscience, with a willingness to stand firm in their values and beliefs, we are not well served. And so it's imperative that we also ask those questions when we look at those who we want to represent and serve us.
Okay, Mr. Gordon, you have the next question. Who are your legislative role models and why? You know,
I'm going to talk about a couple of folks that I serve with currently, because I don't know a lot of the folks who were there historically and before me. And I want to describe them not necessarily as personalities, because you may not know who some of these people are. You may not know Mike Gatto from Los Angeles. You might not know Tony Atkins from San Diego. But these are people who work very, very hard at clarifying issues, bringing people together, trying to resolve problems. They're also individuals who craft legislation based on real needs and problems. I have some colleagues who craft their legislation based on newspaper headlines. That doesn't work too well for me. I think those who work very hard to understand issues, bring people together, and craft common sense legislation are the folks that I would have as role models.
Mr. Coladonato.
I regret to admit that I don't have a lot of role models in the California legislature. I think that most of the work that's currently done there should be done a little differently. If the people there really thought about what was important and focused on what's important, as opposed to getting reelected. Right now, if you go up to the Capitol, as I was yesterday, you'll find that they're on, Senate bill and Assembly bill 1,700 and this and that. There are thousands of bills introduced in each house each legislative session. But look at the problems that aren't getting addressed. Look at how we still have hundreds of billions of dollars of unfunded pension liabilities. Didn't any of those 3,000 or 4,000 bills fix that? Or why is California's education system still in the bottom third of the United States, and the United States is in the middle of the pack or below the average of developed countries? Was none of the 4,000 bills worthy of solving? Was that problem not worthy of any of those 4,000 bills? I will say that one legislator at the federal level, who I take inspiration from, he's a Republican named Justin Amash, who posts to Facebook every single one of the votes he's ever made in the House. And so he's done it several thousand times now. And if I go to his page and he explains why he voted on every single thing he did. If every one of our legislators did it this way, we would have a much, much healthier democracy. And whether I agree with him on the issues or not, I definitely agree with him on style.
Thank you. We're now ready for the closing statements, and we'll go in the reverse order. So, Mr. Gordon, you're the first one.
Great. Thank you. And again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of you for being here tonight. For the last 4 years, I have worked hard to represent this region. I've listened carefully to my constituents. I have gone to Sacramento and attempted to craft common sense legislation. I've had the opportunity to rise to a position of leadership in the legislature, and I now seek a third and final term. I'm under term limits that would allow me to serve you for up to 6 years. I have to tell you, I have an apartment in Sacramento because I'm there 3 nights a week. It's 4 blocks from the Capitol, and I walk to work every day. When I turn the corner and see that building that represents our California democracy, and I know that I have been given the incredible privilege by the people of this region to work and serve in that building, I'm honored and humbled. I'm honored and humbled by those who endorsed me in this race, folks across political spectrums, across our entire communities. And I seek and ask for your help and support. I ask for your vote for one more term, a final term in the California State Assembly.
Thank you. Mr. Coladonato.
I'd like to echo the thanks to the League of Women Voters, of which I am a member. Thank you very much for putting these on. I like to see other candidates in these fora, and I enjoy participating in this one too. I would just like to remind the audience and people watching at home that the reason I would be willing to leave my family in Mountain View and go up to Sacramento is not because I'm looking for a career in politics. I was not a poli-sci major. I have not been going up climbing the rungs of a political career ladder. I just think that the legislators we have in Sacramento, by and large, are not solving the important problems. And I'd like to go to Sacramento to try to solve those problems for all of us. If the problems were solved today, I wouldn't even be up here. I'd be building something with my kids at home, teaching them to program, or taking an online course or something, working, enjoying my life. I think that it would be quite a sacrifice to go to Sacramento, but I think the sacrifice is worth it, given the scale of the problems that go unsolved year after year after year. Education in this state is shamefully underperforming. Our long-term liabilities threaten to send California as a whole into the same hole of insolvency that Stockton, Vallejo, and San Bernardino have already plunged and have only partially come out. Do you all remember a few years ago, they had to furlough federal employees, checks weren't getting paid on time. That's the sort of thing that I think about and worry about, because I want California to be here for my 3 children to grow up in. I want it to be vibrant. I want it to be a healthy, functioning democracy. And for that, I ask you the honor of going to Sacramento to represent all of us in that quest. Thank you.
And this concludes the forum. I would like to thank the candidates, Mr. Greg Colo-Donato and Mr. Rich Gordon, for participating. And please give them a round of applause. And now I pass the mic over to Mary Alice Thornton.
Thank you to Mary Jo Levy for being our moderator. I think we need to give her a thanks. I have a lot of people to thank, and I'll start with the candidates. Thank them for participating in a lively discussion to assist our voters when they make their decision on June 3rd. A special thanks to Trina Loverchek from our league for putting so much time into planning and presenting this event. I want to thank Linda Davis of the Cupertino-Sunnyvale League for keeping us on time. And I want to thank the greeters and card collectors. There are several, Ellen Hope and Diana Post from the South San Mateo County League, Roberta Holloman from the Cupertino-Sunnyvale League, and Veronica Tincher from the Palo Alto League. Our question sorters at the table here are Kathy Lazarus from the Los Altos Mountain View League and Doris Peterson from the Palo Alto League. I want to thank the City Manager's Office for allowing us to use the council chambers. And our list of co-sponsors, I want to thank all of them. The leagues of Los Altos Mountain View, Cupertino-Sunnyvale, South San Mateo County, the American Association of University Women Palo Alto Branch, Avenida Senior Center, the Palo Alto Chamber of Commerce, Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, the Palo Alto Weekly, and Palo Alto Online. Finally, thank you again to the Media Center for all the work of bringing this event to the air. And don't forget, smartvoter.org for more information, and don't forget to vote on June 3rd. More voter information is in the back of the room at the league table. Now, please join the candidates for conversation. Good evening, and thank you so much for coming.